Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about translations and reflections. Alright, so let's start talking about the general overall topic of this unit, which is transformations. So a transformation is a change in location, position, or size of an object. There are three different types of transformations that we'll be talking about in this unit. We have translations, reflections, and dilations. Today's focus will be on the first two, translations and reflections. All right, so let's talk about some vocabulary first. A pre-image is the original image on a coordinate plane. An image is the image after one or more transformations has been applied. The vertices are labeled as what we call prime. So an example would be, if I had a triangle that I labeled as A, B, and C. If I can find my C. There it is. All right, now, if I were to perform some type of transformation and it ended up down here, right, so it changed position, I would then label it as A prime. You see how it's got that little apostrophe after it? We call that a prime symbol. A prime, B prime, and C prime. So this is the pre-image, this is the image. All right, now let's talk about translation, the first type of transformation that we're going to talk today. Here's kind of a real world image of a translation. So translation is just a vertical or horizontal shift of the image. So if you think about these trees, it's kind of like I took a tree and moved it to the right and kept moving it to the right over and over again to get that line of trees. Okay? So it's a vertical or horizontal shift of the image. All right, so here we go. Here we have our pre-image. We want to graph the image of the rectangle after a translation horizontally -5 and vertically 3. So I want to take this guy right here, okay, and I want to shift it. Think about what horizontal means. That's left or right. Okay? So since it's -5, that means I'm going to shift it left. Okay? Negative means left. So I'm going to shift my rectangle left -5 and then vertically 3. Well, that's positive. So that means I'm going to shift it up 3. Okay? So when I do that, I'm going to start with one of my points. I'm going to do point A. And I'm going to take point A and I'm going to shift it left 3 times. Or 5 times, I mean. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I'm not done. Now I need to go up 3. 1, 2, 3. Now I can put my point. And then I'm going to do that with the rest of my points. So I'm going to take my B and I'm going to shift that 3 times and then 3 times, or 5 times and then 3 times. I'm going to take my D, shift that right 5, up 3, and I'm going to take my C and go right 5, up 3. So there are my 4 points. Now I can draw in my square, or rectangle, and I can label my points. So this was my A prime, this was my B prime, this was my C prime, and here's my D prime. In this case, all I did was literally take this rectangle and slide it left and then slide it up. I didn't change the direction or anything of it. So my letters all stay in the same location. I just put the little prime symbol with it. All right, now what's the ordered pair for A? Well, A is now sitting at -4, -1. B is now sitting at -1, -1. C is now sitting at -1, +1, and D is sitting at -4, +1. All right, I want you to try this one on your own. graph the image after translating horizontally 4 units and vertically negative 4 units. Go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, good. Let's take a look at the next one. So we'll go to the next page. This time, we are being asked to write a rule describing the translation below. Well, if we think back to the previous page, okay, them telling us how to move it was the rule. So that's what we need to come up with here. So first we need to determine which one was the pre-image and which one is the image. Well, these three here have the little prime symbol. So that means this is the final one. It means we start with this one here. So I need to figure out how did I get from one to the other. So I'm going to take P and I'm going to see how did I get from P to P prime. I have to move it horizontally. So how far horizontally did I move it? Well, I moved it to the right 9 times. Then I had to go down. And I went down 3 times. So it's going to be the same exact for all 3 points. So I don't need to count for all 3. I just need to figure out what was the rule for 1 point, and all the rest of the points will stay the same because my shape is exactly the same shape and size. So my rule was I had to move horizontal 9 units and vertical -3 units. And that's my rule. I want you to do this one here on your own. Write a rule describing the translation below. Go ahead and pause your video now. All right. Now let's take a look at a reflection. Think about in the mirror. Okay? It's always the opposite. So when we look down here, I really like this image here. Here we have a tree and clouds being reflected in a lake. Okay? So they literally took this and they flipped it upside down. So a reflection is just flipping an object over either the x or the y-axis. Okay? So let's take a look at some examples here. All right, we're going to graph the image of the figure after a reflection over the y-axis. So we're going to reflect this over the y-axis. Okay, so in order to graph an image that is being reflected over the y-axis, first we want to highlight where our y-axis is actually located. So remember, our y-axis is the vertical axis. That's this guy right here. This is my y-axis. So I want to take this shape right here and I want to flip it over the y-axis. Now, when I do that, the shape is going to stay the exact same shape, okay? But when I flip it over, it becomes the mirror image. It also needs to be the same exact distance from the y-axis. So if we look at this, we need to make sure that we count how many units away from the y-axis each point is, and then make its reflection that same distance. All right, so let's start with x. So this first point here, okay, is 1 unit away from the y-axis. So when I go to graph its image, whoops, let me get that out of the way for now. When I go to graph its image, that is also going to be 1 unit away. So there's that point there. And that point becomes my x prime. Okay. Now, when I go to graph w, okay, that is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units away from the y-axis. So its image is also going to be 5 units away. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So its image is going to be here. And then I'm going to label this point as w prime. Right. Now for z, z is 2 units away, so its image will also be 2 units away. And I can label this one as z prime. And then finally, y is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 units away, so its image will also be 4 units away. So it will land here. And then we will call that one y prime. So once I have all of my points in, then I can connect the dots to make my final shape. When we're doing these, we have to make sure that we label the vertices, the corners. Okay? If the original image is labeled, we have to label the new one. That's a must. And they have to match up. Okay? They have to correspond with the right points. So I reflected x over the y-axis, so that new point became x prime. I reflected y over the y-axis, so that new point became w prime. I meant w, I reflected w over and became w prime. I reflected z over and that point became z prime. I reflected y over and that point became y prime. All right, now to write our coordinates. Okay, so my w is sitting at, or my w prime is sitting at -5, 4. And don't mind that. These ones that are here are wrong. All right, so w we said was -5, 4. X prime was -1, 4. Y prime was -4, 1. And z prime was -2, 1. That one is done. All right, now I want you to come over here and complete this triangle. This time you're going to graph the image after reflecting the figure over the x-axis. So this time you're reflecting it over this axis here. So how far from the x-axis is each point? Make sure to do the same thing when you go down. All right, go ahead and pause the video now. And let's come over here to our last page. Now we're going to look at combo transformations. So where we have to do 2 different types of transformations. So first we're going to look at see what happens when we translate and then reflect. So first they want us to take this image and they want us to translate it horizontally -3 units. Remember that means that we are going to go to the left. Okay. Then they want us to reflect over the x-axis. Okay. So first we're going to take this object and we're going to translate it 3 units to the left. All right, so how do we do that? Well, we're going to take, each of our points, okay, and we're going to move them all 3 units to the left. Now that I've done that, now I can take each one and individually translate or reflect over this x-axis. Okay. So I want to translate it over my x-axis, this guy right here. If it helps, you can highlight it just to really make it stick out. So I want to translate it over this line. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to pay attention to how far each one is over the x-axis. All right, so I'm just going to start with R. So when I do R, maybe not. Okay, we can do G, okay, was 2 units away from the x-axis, so that means G prime will also be 2 units away. All right, Z was 1, 2, 3, 4 units from the x-axis, so its reflection will also be 4 units away. Oops. And that's my Z prime. Y was 5 units away. So Y prime will also be 5 units away. And then R, there it is, was 3 units away. So its reflection will also be 3 units away. And I'll label that one as R prime. So now that I've got all my letters where I need them to be, now I can put in my shape. So I translated it left, and then I reflected it over the x-axis. All right, I'd like you to try this one on your own. Translate this triangle vertically 2 units, vertically 2 units, and then reflect over the y-axis. There's a typo in here. Okay. So translate vertically 2 units, then reflect over the y-axis. Remember, your y-axis is this one here. Highlight it if it makes your life a little bit easier to remind you of where you're reflecting it. So go ahead and pause your video now. All right, one more problem. Oh, before we do that, we forgot to fill these in here where we needed to just list out the ordered pairs of all of our new points. So G prime sits at -2, -2. R prime sits at 1, -3. Y prime sits at -3, -5. And Z prime sits at -4, -4. All right, last one that we're going to do together, and then you'll have one more try on your own. All right, this time they want us to reflect, then translate. So first we're going to reflect over the x-axis. So I'm going to highlight my x-axis just to make it stand out. Oops. Make my x-axis stand out. So first I'm going to take this and I'm going to reflect it over the y-axis. Then I'm going to translate it horizontally -5 units. -5 means I'm going to take it to the left. Whoops. -5 units means translate left. All right, so first let's reflect this over the y-axis. So I'm going to take this shape, okay, and I am going to flip it. So now I flipped it over, okay, and I have reflected it over the y-axis. And the are its labels. Okay, so Z, Z prime, S, S prime, Y, Y prime, J, J prime. All right, now I need to translate it horizontally -5 units. So now I'm going to take this, I'm going to translate it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And bring its letters with it. Okay. Done. So first we flipped it, then we translated it. All right, let's write out our ordered pairs. So J prime is now listed located at -4, -3. S prime is now located at -3, -3. Y prime is now located at -4, -1. And Z prime is now located at -2, -1. All right, one more for you guys to do on your own. Okay, this last one here. Please make sure you have all the try on your owns completed when you come into class next time. I'll have the answers for the try on your owns posted in Google Classroom when you come into class next time so you can check them and then ask for help. I will see you in class.